My name is Lydia, and I just turned 17. The evening that shattered everything I knew began as just another ordinary family meal. Paint still stained my fingertips from the art project that had kept me late at school, remnants of the creative work I'd been pouring myself into. My thoughts should have been drifting toward the upcoming spring dance, or the incredible news that a local gallery had accepted my paintings for display. But instead, I found myself frozen, staring at my brother across the dinner table as his expression morphed into something I'd never witnessed before, a fury so raw it made my stomach turn. It all ignited with a single sentence. Pride colored my voice as I shared the gallery's invitation to showcase my work, mentioning how my art teacher believed I had a genuine chance at earning a scholarship. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Silence swallowed the room. My parents offered a hollow, "That's nice, honey," before their attention swung right back to interrogating my brother about his academic performance, his future prospects, his elaborate plans. Trying to lighten the mood, I laughed and tossed out a joke. "I suppose nearly killing myself over my artwork doesn't qualify as an accomplishment around here, does it?" That's the moment his chair flew backward with a violent scrape. He launched to his feet so abruptly that his glass toppled, sending water cascading across the tablecloth while his gaze bore into mine with frightening intensity. "Do you actually believe you're the only person who puts in effort?" he snarled at me. I fired something back, words about him perpetually being the favored child, how exhausted I'd become playing a minor character in what should have been my own story. The effect was instantaneous, like dropping a flame onto spilled gasoline. He stormed around the table, volume escalating, his accusations slicing through the air as he claimed I was deliberately trying to sabotage his reputation. I refused to back down, holding my position until his hand clamped around my forearm. The confrontation detonated into chaos. The memories blur together now. Me shouting, his grip digging painfully into my flesh, the sensation of my spine colliding with the ornate glass door that divided the kitchen from the corridor beyond. He advanced another step, muscles tensed along his jawline, and then with one explosive burst of rage, he drove both hands forward and launched me backward. My entire body hurtled through the barrier of glass. The nauseating crash of shattering panes filled my ears, followed by the shock of impact, the icy hardness of the floor tiles beneath me, then a cacophony of screaming and rushing footsteps. His voice cut through it all, frantic and pleading. "It was an accident, I swear I didn't mean to." Somewhere behind that desperate chorus, my parents were already rehearsing those exact same protective words. Everything faded to black after that. Before I reveal what lies he constructed when the questions started coming, and what I chose to do the day I finally abandoned that house for good, tell me what hour it is in your corner of the world, and where you're experiencing this from. I need to understand just how far this tale of family treachery and awakening to a transformed existence can reach across the globe. Darkness refuses to stay silent. Nobody warns you about that truth. Most people imagine a coma resembles ordinary sleep, just endless nothing. For me, it felt like being imprisoned behind a wall of impenetrable glass, capable of detecting the world continuing on the opposite side, yet completely unable to shift a muscle, form words, or force my eyelids apart. The passage of time became impossible to measure. Initially, hours and days held no meaning. Only sounds existed in that void. The rhythmic beeping of medical machines provided a constant backdrop, accompanied by the gentle shuffle of footsteps, the whisper of fabric whenever someone settled into the chair positioned next to my bed, and of course, voices. Always those voices. My parents spoke first. Mom's tone wavered and fractured from prolonged weeping. "It was an accident," she kept insisting, the phrase becoming her mantra. "He didn't intend for this to happen. He just lost control for one terrible moment." Dad's contribution came out deeper, strained with tension. "We'll explain that she slipped and fell. The floor had water on it from the spilled glass. He attempted to catch her before she went through. That's the version we're giving. We don't need law enforcement picking apart our private business. This family doesn't require that kind of scrutiny."
Accident. Slipped.
Attempted to catch me. The fury built inside my paralyzed form because I desperately wanted to scream that their version was a fabrication. He hadn't reached out to save me from falling. He had thrown me with full force. But my lips remained locked, my fingers stayed motionless, my thoughts sharp as razors yet entirely trapped within a body that had stopped obeying any commands. The days melted into one another, without distinction. Periodically, I detected doctors delivering medical updates. Severe head trauma, numerous lacerations, extensive glass-related injuries. The fact that she survived borders on miraculous, one physician stated. Another voice posed the inevitable question. Can you walk us through exactly what transpired that evening? My mother's response emerged with suspicious speed. The siblings were having an argument. She took a step backward, lost her footing, and fell straight through the glass door. My son reached out trying to prevent it. The way she delivered those lines, so polished and seamless, made it obvious they'd been practiced repeatedly. With each retelling, their manufactured story grew smoother, more acceptable, increasingly convenient for everyone except me. Every revised version carried me further away from the actual events that had put me here. I began learning secrets I was never meant to discover. Once, I heard my brother weeping nearby, his breathing broken and uneven as he choked out. I already told you things spiraled out of control. You promised me you'd handle this situation. Dad's reply came swift and sharp. We're handling it right now. You will repeat the story we agreed on. Is that completely understood? If you have any love for this family whatsoever, you will never speak the word shove again in connection with this incident. My heart hammered violently even as my physical form remained perfectly motionless on the hospital bed. So that revealed everything I needed to know. They understood the real truth. They'd simply selected the alternative version that shielded him from consequences. On a different occasion, an aunt I barely knew paid a visit and sat beside me, whispering softly, "Oh, sweet Lydia, what have they done to you?" Her voice dropped even further, barely audible. You didn't simply slip and fall, did you? Nobody provided her with an answer, but the heavy silence that stretched afterward communicated more than words ever could. Within that silent, frozen existence, a different kind of understanding crystallized inside me. I recognized that while I remained trapped in this helpless state, my personal narrative was being rewritten completely without my participation or consent. Throughout my life, I'd been the compliant daughter, the uncomplicated child who never caused problems. Now I'd been transformed into the girl lying unconscious in a hospital bed, unable to challenge a single fabrication they constructed. Somewhere deep in that suffocating darkness, rage began to ignite and spread. Waking up wasn't enough anymore. I needed my voice restored to me. I needed the authentic truth reclaimed and spoken aloud. And I needed every single person who had deliberately chosen the comfortable lie over defending me to meet my eyes directly and confront exactly what they had done. The moment true consciousness returned to me wasn't anything like the movies portray. There was no sudden dramatic gasp for air, no bolt upright awakening. Instead, awareness crept back gradually, like swimming upward from crushing ocean depths. At first, only the sensation of brightness penetrating my closed eyelids registered. Later, I discovered my fingers could respond to commands, moving fractionally. Then came that pivotal morning when a nurse's voice cut through the fog. "Lydia, if my words are reaching you, try squeezing what I'm holding." The effort felt comparable to hoisting an automobile, yet somehow my fingers managed a feeble grip around hers. Instantly, the room transformed into controlled chaos. Her urgent command rang out, "Someone fetch her parents immediately." When my eyelids finally parted, harsh light assaulted my vision and shapes refused to sharpen. A relentless pounding filled my skull. My throat felt scraped raw. Then my mother materialized beside me, face streaming with tears. "Dear God, sweetheart, you've returned to us. Everything will be all right now. Everything will be fine." For one instinctive heartbeat, I wanted nothing more than to collapse into her embrace and believe those soothing assurances. But then the memories crystallized, their hushed conferences, their carefully coordinated deceptions. Those recollections snapped into sharp focus. I fixed my gaze on her face, forcing words through my damaged throat. "What's the time frame?" She hesitated visibly. You've been unconscious for 28 days. 28 days. For entire weeks, while they shaped the official version. For weeks permitting my brother to hide behind that single sanitized word. For weeks of others constructing my identity and redefining what had transpired. As mental clarity strengthened, I began cataloging the other transformations. Floral arrangements dominated every surface, accompanied by balloons and messages from classmates labeling me courageous and resilient and triumphant. One particular card triggered nausea. Your brother explained about the slipping, someone had scrawled. We're grateful he attempted to rescue you. Attempted rescue. He was being celebrated as the sibling who nearly prevented my supposed carelessness from becoming fatal. My art instructor had composed an extensive letter mentioning the gallery's willingness to reserve my exhibition space until recovery permitted. Yet buried within was a sentence about parental apprehension regarding excessive stress and whether stepping away from artistic pursuits might benefit my well-being. Abandoning the singular passion that defined me. Even my trajectory was being redesigned during my absence. Rehabilitation commenced shortly afterward. Every motion brought agony, but that suffering felt refreshingly authentic. My physical form couldn't fabricate falsehoods. It retained the memory of collision, shattered glass, the terrible descent. While relearning stable ambulation, I simultaneously discovered more about the fabricated account everyone had accepted. Nursing staff would remark things like, "Such a bizarre mishap. Siblings and their quarrels, right?" A visiting neighbor shook her head sympathetically and said, "Fortune smiled on you having your brother present. He described reaching desperately toward you, but momentum was unstoppable." Every observation reinforced the pattern. According to the universally accepted narrative, I was the delicate girl who'd lost her footing while he played the tragic almost savior. Only one person regarded me with visible skepticism about that sanitized version: my aunt. She positioned herself close one evening during a rare private moment. "I was present in that corridor when they assumed you'd never regain consciousness," she whispered quietly. "I distinctly heard someone use the word push. Then I witnessed them unanimously agreeing to eliminate it from discussion permanently. You're not experiencing delusions, Lydia. Your perceptions are valid." My ribcage constricted. Confirmation existed. Another witness had absorbed what I'd processed during those dark, paralyzed hours. What motivates this? I managed hoarsely. Her exhalation carried exhaustion. Because defending the child who embodies all their accumulated aspirations proves simpler than acknowledging he inflicted harm. Fear drives them, but their fear doesn't obligate your compliance. That evening, studying the institutional ceiling tiles, I formulated a silent commitment to myself. I would maintain the performance precisely long enough to regain my capabilities. I would thoroughly document how extensively their fabrications had spread. And once I could support myself independently, I would ensure the truth they'd interred would resurface. After my eyes finally opened, everyone apparently forgot my ears had functioned long beforehand. They exercised greater caution around me now, but discipline falters. I absorbed every utterance like courtroom testimony. Externally, I projected exactly what they needed to see: the damaged girl, thankful for survival, emotionally overwhelmed, perpetually exhausted beyond objection. Internally, I was archiving every fragment. My brother initially couldn't maintain eye contact. When he eventually forced himself to visit alone, he positioned himself at my bed's foot, fists buried in his pockets. "Hey," he offered, as though we'd merely passed each other casually. "I'm relieved you're recovering." I studied him extensively before responding. "The official story says I lost my balance," I said deliberately. "Is that your testimony?" His facial muscles tensed. "You collided with the door," he muttered. The glass gave way. Everything happened incredibly fast. Still not a genuine answer. Did I actually slip? I insisted. His attention shifted to the wall. "You moved backward." My hand made contact. It was unintentional. There it appeared again, the protective terminology that had become their universal defense. I didn't escalate that particular day. Premature. I required him feeling sufficiently secure to continue talking. I needed him forgetting I would eventually weaponize every statement. During rehabilitation appointments, I pushed myself toward incremental progress, additional steps, extended stretches. Expediting my hospital discharge meant sooner access to discover what remained of my room, my artwork, my existence. Meanwhile, I detected hairline fractures in my parents' rehearsed presentation. A social worker appeared once, posing carefully neutral questions about household dynamics. My mother's smile achieved unnatural brightness during her response. Naturally, they experienced conflicts occasionally. That's standard sibling behavior. Nothing alarming. We maintain strong family bonds. The social worker glanced toward me, asking gently, "Do you experience safety in your home environment, Lydia?" 3 pairs of eyes burned with intensity. I could sense my parents' desperate silent pleading for affirmation. I could sense my aunt's silent desperate hope for honesty. I drew a measured breath. "I will," I stated carefully. When we abandoned the pretense about that evening, the atmosphere solidified instantly.
The social worker documented something.
My mother rapidly interjected. "She remains disoriented. The trauma has been substantial." I interrupted, my voice damaged but unwavering. I have clear recollection of being shoved. The first time I'd articulated it before anyone possessing official capacity. No direct responses followed. But afterward, a different quality of tension permeated interactions. Regarding home, according to my aunt's reports, dynamics were transforming as well. Certain relatives had encountered contradictory versions and began seeking clarification. My parents scrambled to maintain their control, dismissing everything as rumor and misinterpretation. Their intensifying efforts to manage the narrative only amplified how obviously there existed a narrative requiring management. The breaking point arrived when I overheard my parents outside my door late one night. My mother's whisper carried clearly, "What happens if she reveals everything?" My father's weary response followed. "Then we manage the consequences. She won't choose to dismantle this family." That precise moment, something inside me crystallized into steel. They were calculating that my affection would guarantee my silence. They were banking on my fear of fracturing the family to shield the person who'd already fractured me. They hadn't realized the girl existing before the glass exploded had ceased to exist. This new version had spent weeks in darkness, listening to them consistently prioritize him above me. Love persisted, certainly, but it had lost its blindness. I began strategizing. Since they'd rewritten my story during my voicelessness, I would rewrite the conclusion now that speech had returned. And I wasn't going to accomplish this through hysterics or theatrical destruction. I was going to accomplish it with the precise thing they'd stolen from me, the truth, articulated in my voice, on my timeline. He stood with his back to my dresser, arms folded across his chest, as if he were the vulnerable one. My pulse raced, yet I kept my tone steady. "I'm asking you to walk me through what actually occurred," I stated. No rehearsed version. No claims of it being unintentional. Just what truly happened. He dragged his palm down his face. "We've already covered this ground, Lydia." "We haven't," I responded softly. "You've shared the account that paints you favorably. Now I want the one where I nearly lost my life." He winced and turned his gaze elsewhere. The silence between us grew heavy. I allowed it to linger. Eventually, he began speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were fighting. I was exhausted. Mom and Dad had just lectured me again about my academic performance. Then you launched into your speech about the gallery exhibition and scholarships and how they focus solely on me. You understand how that comes across."
I kept my eyes fixed on him.
Like reality. He disregarded that comment. I lost my temper. I got right in your face.
You refused to step back.
You never step back these days. I seized your arm. You claimed I was validating your argument. I completely snapped. I forced you backward. The admission came out rough, as though the words caused him physical discomfort. Good, I thought. They ought to hurt. Were you aware of the glass? I questioned. He gave a slow nod. Yes, I was. But my mind wasn't functioning. One instant you were standing before me. The next instant you had vanished, and everything was shattering, and there was blood everywhere, and his voice fractured. I freaked out. I told everyone it was unintentional. They seized that explanation like it was their salvation. I allowed his admission to hang in the air. My body had already known it, in the persistent ache deep in my bones, in the way my skull still pounded whenever I moved too fast. But having him vocalize it without using the word slip transformed everything. Are you aware what it was like hearing all of you when you believed I was unconscious? I asked. Listening to you vow to maintain the story. Hearing them determine which aspects of my suffering were acceptable enough to acknowledge. He swallowed visibly. I was terrified. So was I. I fired back. I was terrified and immobilized. And none of you cared what I actually recalled as long as your prospects remained untarnished. He collapsed into the chair beside my desk. What are you demanding from me? He murmured. I studied him. Truly studied him. He wasn't a villain. He was a frightened, furious boy who had made one horrible decision and then compounded it every single day by repeating that falsehood. Both realities could coexist. I'm asking you to stop sheltering behind them, I said. I'm asking you to confess the truth to someone other than me. I'm asking you to stop allowing them to use my silence as your protection. His shoulders slumped. They'll despise me. They're already aware, I answered. They simply prefer pretending otherwise. This isn't about which of us they favor. It's about whether you're prepared to make me bear the burden of your actions indefinitely. He sat there, caught between terror and remorse. I could observe it clearly. I could also recognize that pressing him too forcefully in that moment would only drive him back into the familiar excuses. So I did the single thing none of them anticipated. I recorded this, I said quietly, tapping my phone resting on the bed. His head jerked up. What? I informed you I needed the truth, I said. Now I possess it in your own words. I won't publish it or distribute it to your entire social circle unless you compel me to. But I'm finished being the sole person paying for your rage. His face turned ashen. You're extorting me. I'm offering you a decision, I corrected. Either you stand with me when I reveal the actual story, or this recording becomes their method of discovery. Regardless, I refuse to remain silent any longer. For the first time since the glass exploded, I observed him recognizing that I wasn't simply the younger sister he could dominate. I was the only individual who could determine whether his deception remained protected, and I had zero interest in protecting it anymore. In the following days, the house felt like an explosive device waiting to detonate. My brother grew more subdued, more on edge. My parents attempted to slide back into normalcy, but normalcy felt like an ill-fitting disguise now. I spent those days painting again for the first time since the incident. My hands shook initially, but muscle memory assumed control. One canvas became two, then three. Every work emerged raw, jagged lines and fractured forms, splashes of pigment that collided rather than harmonized. When my aunt visited and observed them, she pressed her hand to her mouth. This is how it felt, isn't it? She said gently. Being shattered and reassembled incorrectly. I nodded. I'm not merely going to narrate the story, I said. I'm going to display it. She grasped before anyone else that my artwork was no longer purely about aesthetics. It was documentation. It was treatment. It was declaration. 7 days later, I informed my parents I wanted a family gathering. We assembled in the living room, the television dark, the tension so dense it practically vibrated. My brother evaded my gaze, but he remained present. That counted for something. I drew a deep breath. I've been recalling more, I started. My mom instantly tensed. Sweetheart, the physician said your memory might be unreliable. You don't need to force it. It's not unreliable, I said, my voice keener than I planned. I recall him grabbing me. I recall him spotting the glass and forcing me anyway. My dad exhaled like he was depleted. Lydia, we've addressed this. It was unintentional. You children got overly heated. No, I said. He got overly heated. I got thrust through a doorway. My brother recoiled. I rotated toward him. Would you like to articulate it, or should I play the recording? My parents exchanged a bewildered glance. Play what? My mom asked slowly. I raised my phone. The segment where he describes what genuinely occurred. The segment where he uses the word shove. My mom's complexion drained. My dad straightened his posture. You recorded your own sibling, he demanded. You fabricated a story for your own son, I countered. Let's not claim this concerns morality. Silence descended like a weight. My brother stared at the floor. Then, in a voice so diminished I scarcely recognized it, he said, She's speaking the truth. My mom's head snapped toward him. What are you stating? His hand trembled. I forced her, he whispered. I saw the glass was present. I didn't consider it. I simply wanted to silence her. I didn't intend to injure her that severely, but I did. And I allowed you to label it an accident because I was frightened. The oxygen evacuated the room instantly. My dad closed his eyes. My mom shook her head, denial disintegrating. We were attempting to shield you, she said feebly. We assumed. You assumed my existence was an acceptable sacrifice for his prospects, I interrupted. You assumed my silence was an obstacle you could control. You assumed I'd regain consciousness and be so thankful to be breathing that I'd cooperate. My voice wavered, but I persisted. I nearly perished. I forfeited weeks of my existence. I forfeited my position at the gallery. I will endure this head trauma for my entire remaining life, and you wanted to classify it as a bizarre accident, so you could rest peacefully. Tears streamed down my mom's face. We were frightened, she whispered. We didn't want law enforcement involved. We didn't want our family destroyed. You destroyed it the moment you selected a narrative over me, I said. I'm uncertain what occurs next, but I understand one thing. I refuse to carry this burden solo anymore. I informed them with composure and precision that I possessed options. I could deliver the recording to the social worker. I could request the hospital to revise their documentation. I could approach the authorities myself when I felt prepared. Their expressions revealed they comprehended I was serious. I wasn't issuing threats from malice. I was outlining reality. What do you expect us to do? My dad finally asked, sounding more aged than I'd ever heard him. I inhaled. I expect honesty with me, with the physicians, with the educational institution. I expect you to cease acting like I'm delicate and begin treating me like the individual you harmed. I expect therapy, genuine therapy for all of us. And I expect you to support my return to my artwork instead of using my health as justification to keep me silent and confined at home. They looked at each other, then at my brother, who was still staring at his hands as though they were foreign objects. Slowly, they agreed. It wouldn't repair everything. It wouldn't erase the glass, the unconsciousness, the deceptions. But it was the first time I felt the equilibrium shifting back toward me. For once, they were the ones scrambling to adapt to a new reality I had constructed. Therapy didn't miraculously resolve our issues, but it eliminated many of the comfortable falsehoods we'd inhabited for years. Seated before a stranger with a notebook, we were compelled to articulate things we'd never dared voice at home. My parents had to hear themselves justify why they determined one child's spotless record mattered more than the other child's damaged body. My brother had to look me directly in the eyes and repeat the word shove repeatedly until it ceased sounding like an accident and began sounding like what it was, a deliberate action. I had to confront my own behavioral patterns, too. The years I'd spent remaining quiet to preserve harmony. The way I'd persuaded myself that being compliant and undemanding meant I was cherished. It emerged that I wasn't solely angry about the night of the glass door. I was angry about every occasion I'd suppressed hurt, so someone else wouldn't have to feel discomfort. As the months progressed, things genuinely did transform. The hospital amended their documentation after a follow-up, where I clarified that my injuries resulted from being forced during an altercation, not from slipping. The social worker monitored more frequently. There was discussion of repercussions, of an incident on his record, of programs and anger management and compensation. For the first time, the word consequence entered our family lexicon in a tangible way. My brother began attending therapy independently. Sometimes he returned home depleted and withdrawn. Other times, he'd knock on my door and clumsily share something he'd realized about himself, about pressure, about how our parents had elevated him as the favored child without instructing him how to handle his own frustration. I listened, but I didn't permit his development to erase my suffering. Both could exist simultaneously. Justice for me didn't resemble him in restraints. It resembled him no longer being capable of concealing what he'd done. It resembled my parents finally perceiving me as more than a component in their narrative of the flawless family. It resembled me possessing choices. When the gallery contacted me again, cautiously inquiring if I was still creating art, I sent them photographs of my recent work, the fractured pieces, the harsh pigments, the jagged lines. "This is what the past year has felt like," I wrote. "If you still wish to exhibit my art, I wish to exhibit the truth." They agreed. The evening of the exhibition, I stood in a space filled with people observing canvases that had been born from my suffering. My parents were present, awkward and proud and guilty simultaneously. My brother lingered at the rear, hands in his pockets. Beside one of the largest pieces, a chaotic explosion of color bursting through a dark, fractured shape that looked unmistakably like a door, there was a small placard with my artist's statement. It didn't identify names. It didn't narrate the complete story, but it communicated enough. It communicated that sometimes the individuals who harm you are the ones who are meant to safeguard you. It communicated that awakening from unconsciousness can signify more than merely opening your eyes. It can signify recognizing your existence was constructed on a narrative that never belonged to you. It communicated that speaking the truth, even quietly, can be simultaneously an act of retribution and an act of recovery. Following the exhibition, my aunt embraced me so tightly I could scarcely breathe. "You accomplished it," she whispered. "You took the worst event that ever occurred to you and transformed it into something that belongs to you." Departing the gallery that evening, the atmosphere felt different, lighter. My brother caught up to me on the pavement. "I read your statement," he said. "I understand it was about me." I looked at him. "It was about all of us," I replied. "About what occurs when we select silence over truth." He nodded, eyes moist. "I'm attempting," he said. "I understand," I answered. "And I'm not waiting for you to complete attempting before I live my existence." That's what transformed most after the unconsciousness. Not merely our family dynamic, not merely the way they regarded me. I transformed. I ceased measuring my value by how much difficulty I didn't create. I ceased allowing fear of damaging the family prevent me from defending myself. My revenge wasn't a theatrical courtroom scene or a public exposure. It was walking into my future with my head elevated, my narrative in my own hands, and the knowledge that every time someone hears it, including you right now, the deception that nearly consumed me grows slightly weaker. And if you've ever been the quiet one in your family, the agreeable one, the one who is expected to forgive and forget, perhaps my story will accomplish for you what painting accomplished for me, remind you that your voice is not an obstacle to control.